Welcome back to Ride JBI. I'm JB. Today we're going to take a look at the 2024 Kawasaki KX450 Showa shock that we just finished revalving. We're going to go over exactly what we did and what hardware components that we utilized during this revalve process. For 2024, it is a new shock compared to the previous 2019 to 2023 generation. The shock body aesthetically looks very similar from the previous generation, but it is different. What you can really tell the biggest differences would be the shock shaft assembly and clevis assembly. If you are familiar with the Honda CR450R Showa shocks, you will recognize this as it looks very similar and it is almost identical to that. So what we did for this shock is we revalved it to our JBI suspension motocross spec and also did a few other hardware updates as well. First one we did was our JBI black bumper. That replaces the OEM bumper that fits here. That looks like this piece. The main reason we do that, man, is these bumpers often dry out pretty quick due to sun exposure, and they also like to absorb moisture, meaning after you wash your bike. You can see our bumpers are black. Reason being is they have a slight rubber additive to them. It gives it that black color. It also seals the bumper, so they're less likely to absorb water after you wash it, and it gives it better UV protection. So in other words, the bumper is going to stay nice and soft like a bumper should instead of drying out as the OEM one does. And even better, they're cheaper than OEM. The next hardware part that we utilized was we replaced the stock nitrogen bladder cap that we have right here. The main reason we do that is, as you can see, there's no Schrader valve on it, meaning the type of valve that you'd utilize to put air inside of your tire. Instead, they use a rubber plug, which I'll show you inside of there. So what we do is we pierce that plug going this way with the needle. And that plug is self-sealing, but it's not always self-sealing. So when it comes to reliability, that is something we put a high value on here at Ride JBI. So we have found that compared to the rubber plug, a Schrader style fill valve is much more reliable. So we always like to default to that. Most shocks in the past pretty much always had these. The manufacturers kind of started to go away from them. My guess would just be to lower the cost of goods sold, meaning manufacture the same shock, but kind of limit their cost on it. Not a bad thing on their end, but again, when it comes to filling a shock with gas, checking how much gas is in there, and then just being sure of how reliable it is at encapsulating or containing that gas, the Schrader valve is just the way to go, hands down. As of this year, we now offer two colors for our JBI bladder caps. We got the green and now recently the black, and that is what is currently installed on the shock that you see now. So that's cool stuff, but my favorite stuff is what is on the inside of the shock absorber. That is going to be our JBI suspension valving. That's the valving we did to the main piston that connects to the shock shaft. So we have this set up for motocross. And then my even favorite part is what we did to the valving inside of your compression adjuster right here. So on the back side of your compression adjuster is another set of shims and also another piston. That is this piston I have here in my hand right now. And we always go ahead and modify these here at the shop, but we're going to be offering do-it-yourself versions of the same JBI spec. So I didn't want to have to ask people to go ahead and have to grind and remove the threads on these ones, because once you do, you don't have a lot of threading left. So what we did at JBI was we remanufactured this piston, but we didn't do it exactly. Instead, what we did was we remanufactured it to the same style of piston that is inside of the Showa kit shock. So they look very similar side by side, and that's a good thing. We're not really trying to change the, let's say, damping profile of it, but we added a nice little radius to all the intake holes. And then on the back side, you can see the big difference in the geometric pattern that's on the back. I'm not gonna get too much of that into that in this video. But again, the gold piston I have is pretty much very similar to the Showa A-kit piston in there. So with that in mind, here's the entire assembly itself. So this is what the piston would look like. It's got our new titanium nut on there, all the shims on the back, and of course a new post as well for everything to be bolted to. So on the back side of this is where this piston is going to be, right there. So this shock got a nice comprehensive revalve. What do I mean by that is we revalved the shim settings on the main piston and also on your compression adjuster piston. This is very important because when it comes to revalving forks, we almost always revalve the base valve, which on the shock, that would be this assembly. And we almost always revalve the mid valve as well. And that would be like the main piston on the shock absorber. So when it comes to tuning shocks, you always want to give equal both valves equal the tension. And so soon we'll have DIY kits of what we're doing here. And part of that DIY kit will be providing you with this entire new piston assembly. So that way you'll just have to pop out the old one, drop this one in, reinstall the circlip, and then now you have JBI technology, but custom valve and custom built to the specifications that you tell us. We'll do another video that goes into more details of what is all included in the DIY kit. It will definitely include our compression piston, one of the bladder caps, whether you want the green or black, our bumper, and then we'll be providing you with shims as well for the main piston assembly. We'll be maintaining the use of the stock piston. It works really well. It's the same piston you already find in the A-kit shock as well. So in my opinion, there's no really performance on the table to be had from modifying that, but there is a lot of performance to be had from modifying the shim settings or the valving that's tied to that. What we can expect on this shock, man, was for the 24, the stock settings definitely were, I'd say, very similar to the 23. So there's definitely a lot of potential on the table. And with this shock, what we really focused on was giving the shock a lot more hold up, so you can ride it a lot more aggressively without it feeling overly soft. But the tricky part was doing that while also maintaining a very soft, not very soft, but a very plush and comfortable feel. So that way the shock still has a very good feel going over the small and medium-sized bumps. I'll say we improved the hold up and bottoming of the shock by a good 20-25%. So something that's gonna be very noticeable. And then we improved the small bump compliance. So think of the bumps you find going into a corner or coming out of a corner. We improved that by about 10%. So not as much, but again, I think this shock already did it pretty well. So we wanted to focus on a little more better small bump compliance, which again, we achieved about 10% better, and then a lot more hold up out of it. So you can ride the shock a lot more aggressively. Also, with that extra hold up, it now makes your clickers, let's say, more effective. It gives you more tunable range. You can back the clicker out on compression and make it rather soft, but you still have a good amount of hold up in there no matter what. And then you can always turn in that clicker a lot too and make the shock quite a bit firmer if you need that as well. So thanks for tuning in, man. I'm really pumped with the development and the tuning we've done so far on this 24. We're lacking on getting you guys videos of us actually testing. Every time we do, we either just forget to grab the damn camera or we're just too caught up in testing at the moment. But we're quickly gonna start working on getting some rider feedback of these new shock settings we have for these 2024 Kawasaki KX450s. All JBI suspension services and parts can be found at ridejbi.com.